Welcome to another episode of the Untold Stories. Remember, if you are listening to the right stories, then you are listening to the Untold Stories. The story which I am going to share with you is something which has changed my life. I know in the initial stages, when I was in a different profession, the results we used to produce, it's not that it didn't get into my head. It did. There was a period I used to walk around thinking I was doing great things in my life. But one story, one incident changed my life. Even before we get into the other episode of the podcast, I would love it if this story and incident could also transform your life. It seems a crow was flying holding a piece of meat between its beak, and very soon it saw many other birds were chasing the crow. The further and further it kept flying, more and more birds were chasing till it eventually occurred to the crow, they are all not chasing me, they are chasing the piece of meat I am holding between my beak. It opened and dropped the piece of meat, and as the piece of meat was falling down, all other birds went after the falling piece of meat. Alone in the sky, the crow remarked, "In dropping the piece of meat, I gained the freedom of the sky. The entire sky became mine." And that piece of meat in our life is our ego. We think the world is against us, the world is nasty to us, we think the world is hurting us, but it is actually the ego which is going through all these things. I am not giving you a sophisticated philosophy, I am just sharing with you a very simple understanding. When ego comes, everything else including your peace of mind goes. When ego comes, everything else goes. When ego goes, everything else comes. The freedom with which you can live your life, because as long as your ego involves the world, you have to live your life as if your own shadow is chasing you. You live in that eternal need to prove yourself to the world, which you don't have to. You are accountable to your creator, not to every next stranger you cross in life. You are accountable to your conscience, you are accountable to the truth, you are accountable to the magnificence with which you have been created as a human being. But we live our lives in this eternal need to prove ourselves to every individual, not realizing if you expect everybody to be happy with you, you can never be at peace with yourself. Because it's impractical that everybody can be happy with you, and yet your own ego puts that demand on you. So my dear friends, my only request is that before you realize this podcast is over, drop all your labels. Drop all your ego identities and purely sit there as a seeker wanting to get transformed. It does not matter about the 100 ideas that get discussed in the episode. One idea, one trigger, something in this 10 minutes, let it come and hit you, and that will be a transformation. And the day is made that your life and my life crossed today. And I promise you, when I sit here and make an episode, I am sitting here with a tremendous sense of responsibility. I don't think I sit here and make any of my episode feeling it as a sense of status. I feel a sense of responsibility. Dear friends, ever since I started making this podcast episode, my mind is very clear that your time for awakening has come. I happened to be the voice behind the wisdom. If your life and my life did not cross, you would still be awakened by the same wisdom which would have come to you through some other channel. I don't sit here with any sense of status, but with a tremendous sense of responsibility. With the collective human potential that is sitting and listening to me right now, we should not miss the opportunity to transform. It is not about the speaker, it is about the potential life that you can have. It is said in the Rigvedas that a seeker in his prayer to Lord says, "My Lord, I have received so much from you, so much from you. Some of the best things that are there in my life, you gave it to me without me having to ask for it. Lord, it seems you know better what is good for me than I know it myself. So much I have received from you, my Lord, I feel like giving something back to you. So I thought, I will offer this flower to you. But my Lord, these flowers are already yours. Whose flower I am offering to whom? So I thought, since I have received so much from you, I will offer these fruits to you. But these fruits are already yours. My Lord, why have you put me in such a helpless situation that I have received so much from you and have nothing to give you in return? So I thought, I will pray to you and express my gratitude towards you. But my Lord, the air I will use to articulate my prayer is already yours. Even in prayer, there is nothing that is mine that I can give it to you. The Vedas so beautifully explained. The devotee finally says, I have received so much from you. Whatever I need to give it to you is already yours. So, my Lord, I am left with nothing to give you except to drop this body of mine at your feet. And he drops the body at the feet of the Lord. He prostrates. The first time I read this story, tears trickled down my eyes. I realized how often we all say, I have done this for the world. I do so much for the world. I care for the world. I contribute to the world. I donate to the world. Forget about the larger world. We say we do so much for our children. I have done so much for my parents. I do so much for my wife. And the wife says, I do so much for my husband. Not realizing the Father has done so much for us. We are just reciprocating a very small portion of what we have received from the Father to His children. In fact, the more and more we experientially realize how much we have received and how little we are capable of giving, this whole feeling of I am doing so much for the world, this whole ego of I am doing so much for the world, in that very moment dissolves. Remove all your labels, remove all your ego identities, because what we have received from the Almighty and what we are capable of giving in return cannot be compared. Let this ego of I am doing so much for the world be dissolved. Let the ego dissolve. Remember, if you are listening to the right stories, then you are listening to the Untold Stories. And if this episode has matched your wavelength, then share it with people who need it. And just in case you have the time, then you must listen to my other episode, I Am Crying Because I Let Him, where I talked about if our attitude, results or happiness is to ever improve, we must exercise the painful discipline required for weeding out the garden of our life. That's all from this episode. Remember friends, you too have untold stories to tell which can make a difference in someone's life, because certain untold stories are born out of certain lives and certain lives are born out of certain untold stories.